this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. I'm doing good. Everything is fantastic. As you know, I want to address this here because, before I used to talk about my chickens and everything in Chicken World, and I said, no, I'm not doing that. I've got that separate channel on for the chickens. But I'm going to mention it because, as you know, lately in the news, we've had some stories going on about the chicken feed. All right. And I just want to say that it started going about a month ago, and it's picked up steam. And I've listened to like different sources of people like myself who just either have a backyard flock or something bigger, and then the bigger ones. And of course, the whole thing stems because to buy a dozen eggs costs you an arm and a leg. And, I can tell you, luckily, since I have free range chickens, that they go all over my property, I haven't run into that problem because yes, I do use that feed in question. I'm not even going to say what the name of it is, but I feed food scraps, and since my chickens are free range, they forage. That kind of eases the problem. As a matter of fact, I've had a lot of eggs, and I know that a lot of the people that have noted that they've had that problem have been because they have their chickens in a coop or contained in a run. As a matter of fact, this is how they realized something was going on when they started either giving them different food or like food scraps, or one of their chickens got out, started eating something different. All of a sudden, voila, here we have eggs. But anyway, I wanted to mention that because I know some people sent me emails saying, "Hey, are you having any problems with your eggs, the egg laying from your chickens?" And again, about a month ago, I did, but as you know, even in northern Florida, we had a few days where it fell below freezing, and that will happen with chickens. Cold weather will slow down egg production, and I was thinking, oh, it's that, but so far it's picked up. But again, I'm an outlier. I don't fall into that circle of people where, hey, my poultry, they're getting fed strictly whatever feed they're giving them. So yeah, there's a skinny on that. So yeah, and everybody's doing well on my chickens and things like that. And yep. So anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is who I have as a guest tonight here at Stories of the Supernatural. This gentleman's name is Dan Willis, and he is one of the top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001 in front of the major mainstream media of the world. It was a world disclosure event prompted by those within our government with legal constitutional authority being illegally denied access. This event was asking for a congressional hearing in order to bring forth a witness scientist within the unacknowledged special access projects in order to release the advanced technologies derived from extraterrestrial reverse engineering that have been hidden for over 70 years that could stop further damage to our planet, as well as acknowledging the extraterrestrial presence on our planet. Instead, the message was sanitized by a controlled mainstream media to the public. Sound familiar? From his personal firsthand experiences, as well as looking into the historical indicators that have been purposely omitted from our education system that reveals an infiltration of unwarranted influences operating behind the secrecy established for our national security system. a system that is used to control the public's perception that forms our agreed upon reality. This is done in order to hide their illegal operations and why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality. Dan is an ex-radio broadcast engineer and ABC newsman. He has taken a keen interest in how the mainstream media has withheld disclosure of the full message to the public, a message based on the hundreds of credible military and intelligence witness testimonies. The following article reflects on this question: who controls the agreed upon reality through the mainstream media and why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality? The answer to this question, of course, you must ultimately decide. And help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Dan?
Hey, Marlene, great to be on the show. I'm good.
Great. You know what? I'm gonna interject this. After reading the introduction to your bio and everything, I know this might sound really corny, but you know that I talked about that and I don't know if you've heard of it, this thing going on with the chicken feed. It's like a storm in a teacup, but it's kind of a microcosm sometimes of what's going out in the larger world, but on more serious subjects. Where once upon a time that wouldn't have been controversial. How's that? It would have been like, hey, what's going on? And now I'm listening to different sources, videos, podcasts, and just people putting out, regular people with chickens. And everybody's like, kind of like, man, what is going on? And it's like, man, this as far as this has gotten out of hand as far as why people feel like, how can I say it? That they're so suspicious. How's that? Even about something as ordinary as chicken feed.
Well, it's just one indication of many. It's
Yeah.
all these things that people used to call conspiracy theories are
Hmm.
now becoming kind of
Yeah.
regular in the evening news these days.
Yes.
So, yeah, what I was involved in, testifying under oath over 2 decades ago was took me a bit to wrap my head around what we were disclosing.
Hmm.
Um, Today, it's not so difficult to reveal some of the things that myself being an ex ABC newsman, I saw the place was packed with reporters and all the main there's 22 cameras of CNN, CBS, ABC, all the networks were there,
So
and
you
I
were, yeah, you had that background already by the time you were there,
yeah
as far as
yeah
the media, in other words.
yeah how could what we were disclosing not change a world changing event? But I didn't know what Operation Mockingbird was. I didn't realize that what brought about the event was that our legal constitutional government was being denied access ever since Eisenhower because of
Hmm.
our history has been rewritten. We don't realize that the Nazis had fully infiltrated. There was a surrender back in 1955. Every president's CIA director has been denied access to these illegal, unacknowledged special access programs. And that's what brought about the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson. He was denied access to these, and he told Dr. Greer, if you can get your people together. I was one of 21 witnesses that you see here in the background. We
Hmm.
were backed by hundreds of military intelligence witnesses, all willing to testify under oath, but they control the media. And
Yes.
so talking about that we have a solution to get off of nuclear oil and coal, 0 point energy. We have faster than light craft, bases on the other side of the moon. Just all this explosive testimony. They figured out how to do what's called a limited hangout to make it sound like, they want to have a congressional hearing on the reality of UFOs. So they effectively kept it from the mainstream media's audience awareness. And nothing new these days, right?
Well, and I want to say also, and I think it's become very obvious, unfortunately, where there's no, you always hear about these stores being broken by some investigative journalist, that there it is. And it's like almost that type of journalism has gone by the wayside. Okay. Or if anything is broken, it's not really, when you look at it, not controversial when you have all these things. And it's like, were these just the kind of journalists that were being hired, or were some of them thinking, you know what, if I go after this story, I'm going to find myself unemployed or worse.
Exactly.
And I guess just some decided like, nah, I need to pay my mortgage or something. I mean, I'm just, that's the only thing I can think of why so many, um, why journalism has gone the road it's gone down.
The
Uh,
ones that do the narrative and support the agenda, they have a nice fat yearly
oh yeah,
salary.
sure. I'm
The
sure. I'm
ones that
sure.
don't get on the unemployment line.
Well, I'm thinking at some point, I'm thinking these people don't even get hired to begin with. I think that when they go in for an interview, they're told by the HR or hiring or whoever does it, this is what we're looking for. If you see this type of
Oh, for
person
sure.
walk in, don't even bother. Even if you think, just if you recognize the potential is there where this person might say, hey, that's not what's really, forget it. That other one might be mediocre, but if they're on board, okay, go with that one. And sometimes I think that that's why it's so pervasive.
And it's centrally controlled.
Yeah.
Besides 1950 Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA had 400 journalists they were paying, and then in 1954 they started the Bilderberg meetings along with the Council of Foreign Relations that control the 6 corporations that control 90 some percent of what the public the public
Well,
perceive.
right, the perception, exactly. The perception. And I think sometimes I look back at that and I wonder, is it a question of being, and I'm talking collectively, let's say Americans. I mean, even though I think other parts of the world, but let's talk America. It's a combination of being naive, lazy, trusting, um, where we
Well,
just didn't realize something like that on that scope could be taking place.
it's not the public's fault. They're very clever. They do in generational indoctrination. Like when you were a
Yes.
child, um, I'm in my 70s, so my father used to watch Walter Cronkite, and
Yeah.
I'd watch it with him, and there's no reason to suspect anything. You would just imagine, hey, these are journalists, and they're checking, and everybody's checking each
Yeah.
other, and
They're honest.
nothing would be able to get out that's not being double checked,
Yeah.
and so you just naturally take that into adulthood, and you
Yes.
don't question until you start seeing some major glitches happening.
I think also the advent of the internet, as far as other sources being able to reach somebody, okay. Um, I think that's also how helped with traction as far as getting these stories out where people are actually taking notice, going, wait a minute, um, that's that's right. In other words, before, you might have had a couple of people that they're like, oh yeah, no, they're kind of kooky, that kind of deal. Like, let's humor them, but let's not take these people seriously when
Oh
they're
yeah,
talking about
yeah.
whatever the case might be.
The giggle factor, yeah, all
Yeah,
that, yeah.
exactly. And I'm going to ask you something real quick because lately I've seen a lot of coverage on this. Do you think that what happened with President Kennedy back in the 60s of this assassination had anything to do with any of this, as far as whether it was a UFO, or because I've heard it, and again, you don't know how much was because part of it was that he was planning to disclose on what we knew about UFOs or extraterrestrials.
Alan Dulles working with James Jesus Angleton, they were they were attempting to destroy all these documents, and one of them got pulled out of the fire. It was called the Burn Memo, which was
Hmm.
Alan Dulles was an MJ-12. He was MJ-1. He was the head of the MJ-12. Originally, Truman set up the original MJ-12 group back in 1947, but during Eisenhower administration, there was a loss of control into the corporations, as Eisenhower tried to warn on television. And what happened was Allen Dulles set up an assassination directive against Kennedy. And this was Kennedy put a top secret memo to the CIA director to release the UFO files. 10 days later, he was assassinated.
Okay, that answers that question.
And
Yeah,
then the Warren Commission, of all things, is all made up of 33rd degree Freemasons that
right.
said it was a lone gunman, with a bullet and
Right,
everything.
exactly, exactly, yeah, the everything, yeah. They had set everything up. If you look at now, in hindsight, everything that surrounded it before, you could tell that this was something that was orchestrated totally, totally. From the person from Oswald to everybody surrounding that whole thing. It was an orchestrated move. And again, I think back then the American people were like, besides the heartbreak of having the the president assassinated, I think it would most people wouldn't have been able to like actually believe that this was so, how can I say, manipulated. I mean,
Oh,
like, how when you go down the rabbit hole, how far down does that rabbit hole go?
Oh, and then the
And
CIA puts out a dispatch to all its operatives to call anybody that's questioning the Warren Commission findings as a conspiracy theorist. And that's how how
yes,
how that term started, and they still use it today.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very, very popular. And they even lied to their own agents and said that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't involved with the intelligence agencies, but he was. He was. So they've
right.
been lying to their own agents.
It was right, and because I'm thinking to myself, I think you had to be really up the food chain to really, really know what's going on. But if you were, otherwise, I don't think they could have gotten that many people. But you were told, if let's say if you were an FBI agent or whoever, and you were being told, you would tend to believe your whatever your superior and take him at his word. You're not going to be there saying, "Hey, well, question them again," because everybody then was still a product of their upbringing. And I understand. When we had that Operation Paperclip, obviously after World War II, that we brought over these German scientists to work, you know, and apparently they had impressive discoveries. But there was already stuff going on here within our government already, as far as the banking system, right?
Well, yeah, they had, Nazi sympathizers. They wouldn't have been able to do this without their sympathizers within the
Okay,
U.S. that they were working with.
okay,
Like, for example, Alan Dulles, who was infamous for the Nazi infiltration,
right,
was working with General Reinhard Gehlen, who was head of Nazi intelligence, which they did a bargain to bring in the Soviet intelligence that they had hidden away in the Bavarian mountains, because Truman was afraid of the Soviets being a threat. And
right.
so they brought that intelligence in exchange for bringing in 3,000 Nazi spies into the CIA.
Wow,
And then, everyone's, NASA, the, Nazi Germany had figured out the torsion physics of anti-gravity going back to 1934.
right,
And so um, the whole thing with NASA being run by former Nazi SS
right,
officers, keeping us believing that rocket propulsion is the only way to overcome Earth's gravity, when they knew full well, as Professor Hermann Oberth, Werner von Braun's mentor, said, we had help from people from other worlds. They had entered into an agreement, an alliance with the Draco reptilians down in Antarctica. And, when I started researching this stuff, I didn't
mm-hmm,
know anything about all this stuff. All that sounds like
right,
wild, crazy science
right,
fiction stuff, until some media company out of Hollywood wanted me to write an article on why, who controls the agreed upon reality through the mainstream media, and why they fear
mm-hmm,
disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality. Because when I heard what the other witnesses were disclosing and how the media covered it, I gladly accept it. And for the last couple of decades, I've been researching, based on witness testimony, authenticated documents, and, you know, starting to put the history that we were never taught in school together,
exactly,
which sounds like the most incredible science fiction movie you could imagine. Um,
yes,
Lately I've been, taking it to another level. I I did a show with uh, my French friend Elena Denan, and you've probably heard of her.
mm-hmm,
She's a contactee with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and
okay,
we've been exchanging quite a bit. In fact, it's interesting. In the 1980s, due to an experience in around 1977, I had an ET interaction experience of a being that gave me a download of geometry and
Okay.
consciousness and what the matrix
Okay.
was all about. It was like totally, totally new. It put a burning desire to try to understand what was going on. And so I sought out IBM's head scientist, Dr. Marcel Vogel, and I helped him with a laboratory setting up. And he was quantifying, working with about 24 medical doctors, working with cut quartz crystals in order to
Okay. Yes.
alleviate, diseases and things. And
Mm-hmm.
so it turns out that her contact, Thorhan Uredion, her his younger brother is actually going to a university in the Pleiades that is
Okay.
learning how to terraform planets and has advanced knowledge on crystals. So ever since of April of last year, we've been doing a dialogue back and forth and asking
Okay.
questions, and incredible corroboration with the research work of Dr. Marcel Vogel.
Okay.
Um, and what's kind of cool is that the regressive extraterrestrials, the ones that were entered into agreement, basically Eisenhower, behind his back, MJ-12 entered into agreement because they wanted this technology from the Nebu Grays, and
Okay.
and so these regressive extraterrestrials back in 2021 have all been purged out of our solar system. So now we only have the Earth minions now to deal with, and they have the intergalactic confederation has entered into our solar system,
Okay.
and this just sounds like crazy
No,
amazing
you know
stuff.
what? Once you know, no, you know what? You think of it. You remember back in, and of course there was a product of the Cold War, the 1916, the flying saucers and everything,
Oh,
and even
right, for
and in some
sure.
earlier writers, and it always seemed, then you, as time goes by, you're thinking, well, either these people knew something, or were they channeling, or were some of these ideas in these stories that are supposedly fiction, had a basis in truth, and we're finding it even now more so with other stories, as far as that people are going, man, I thought this was purely fiction, and it turns out it's closer to reality than we thought.
Right, right. In
I
fact,
thought,
the science fiction kind of falls short for
yeah,
what the
yeah,
real
exactly,
reality is, and
exactly,
that's how it keeps its own best secrecy, because
sure,
we've been falsely indoctrinated for so many
right. It's like a hidden
decades.
in plain sight kind of deal.
Yeah, somewhat. So yeah, we have a whole lot of relearning to do, a lot of unlearning to do, and a lot of relearning to do
So, do you think
about
then that,
our
because
history.
from what you're describing, there's more than one type of extraterrestrial, all right? And I guess they have, I don't, for lack of a better word, they just have different. I don't want to say a moral compass, but different agenda or different aim. And some are, I guess, more on our side versus others that are,
Mm,
I don't know, for lack of a
like
better
here on
word.
Earth, they figured there's about 4% on the planet is about they're psychopaths, right?
Right,
It's
exactly. Yeah,
about the same ratio out there. About 95% of them are benevolent or benign.
right.
But there are, some regressive ones that are dangerous, but
Yes.
they have been purged out of. Fortunately, the more advanced ones have higher levels of technology.
Okay.
Um, and so when I, testified back in May of 2001, one of the witnesses, Clifford Stone, uh, revealed that back in 1989 they had already categorized 57 different extraterrestrial species. Of course, there's
Oh,
hundreds of them. There's way more than that.
right.
Um, so yeah, and they look like us. Some of them
Right, and
look a
that's
lot.
always been one of the questions. Do they look like us? Or do we look like them? As in, were they tweaking with our genetics, or are they totally, you've heard of, we've heard of like the reptiles type looking, which are really not don't, I mean, they're not looking as far as humans, and then you get the grays, which you always hear they might be biomechanical. There's so many different versions of the types.
Right,
Um,
right. Some of them look a lot better than us, you
yeah,
know,
right,
and
exactly.
they live for, 900, 1,000. Some live for thousands and thousands of years. They have figured out how to regenerate themselves. Unlike we've been tampered with our
Okay.
genetics. And from what I understand, the medbed technologies that are being,
Yes.
constructed on the other side of the moon, they have the ones who were initially messed with our genetics to cause us, I mean, it's like, what is it, less than 80 years and we
Right.
expire, in these bodies.
Yes.
They have given the code back that was before we were tampered with, that it's going to be
Right.
incorporated into these holographic medical beds. That I actually had some experience with the technology when I worked with Dr. Marcel Vogel. We were
Really?
working on a camera that could holographically project and capture on film and be able to tune forwards and backwards in time. And it seems that the holographic field has the element of time in it, where, let's say
Okay.
you had your leg chopped off, for example,
Mm-hmm.
um, they can go back in time just before your leg was chopped off
Okay.
and holographically repairs the
Wow.
and it's like, like magic. It like your limb is restored. um
Okay. And of course, you're not going to reject it because it's your limb.
what was that?
No, you wouldn't, and your body will not reject it because it's your body, it's your
Oh, yeah,
organism.
it's the optimal part of you. So
Yes,
they
exactly.
go in and can find when your body was optimal.
Right.
um and that's how they, the because of the intervention, which of the reptilians working with the Nazi alliance, it violated the
Mm-hmm.
prime directive of non-interference, and so
Okay.
it gave permission to the Galactic Federation of Worlds to work with the US Navy secretly, had their own program going, which launched back in the 1980s, called Solar Warden. This event
Okay.
back here inspired a hacker, which you're familiar with, Gary McKinnon, who found the Solar Warden program in the NASA computers. Um, they basically can recruit people, as you're are no doubt aware, that for
Yes.
a 20-year tour of duty in space, then time and age regress them back to the point of enlistment, erase their memory as though nothing ever happened. But many of them are starting to have
Wow.
total recall, of which
That's so
I'm
interesting.
friends with a number of them,
Wow.
and
That's
it's it's incredible what the
is that
public
the
are going
reason
to
why
become
we've
aware of.
okay. We've never gone back to the moon, and and you hear about it, and it's really funny because the first time I heard about this, about us not returning to the moon, I said, "Oh my God, that's right. We
Something
haven't
fishy
returned to the
there,
moon."
huh?
You know?
Yeah,
Is
well,
that it?
William Tompkins was working with TRW, which they saw the live feed and saw the huge, huge. I mean, it made the lunar module look like a speck. The
Right.
huge reptilian craft that was lined up along the far crater of the moon, and we were warned off the moon. That's why we didn't go back.
Right. It's like all this effort, the race to the moon, that you remember when everything, and we had to get race against the Soviets and blah, 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 blah. And there was the first man on the moon and and then all of a sudden I was like, boop. And and all
We
of a
did
sudden
go to the moon, but some footage was substituted because they couldn't show what was actually happening
right.
up
And then
there.
of course you always have the ones that no, we never did go, and then others. But then whether you always think, well, why all of a sudden after all that effort and all that discovery and yay, you see all these
Another
people in the
glitch in the
tech room, yay,
matrix.
then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we got there. That's it. We don't need to go back. It's like, why not? But then you see them, they've built that space station, the one that they go out there and they're trying to do all these experiments for how long, what happens with, the loss of gravity on the human
International
body
Space
and all that.
Station. Uh-huh.
And it always makes you think, well, they're doing that. Why wouldn't they do something on the moon of all places? Yeah, instead of a space station. So,
Well, it turns out we we have operations on the moon.
right. And I think this is how's this? I think we're so distracted by life, whatever it is, that the thought of that is mind-boggling. And I think a lot of people, when they start thinking about it, just shut down and go, "Nah, I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna think that's that big a lie," because that's the only way to what it is. As far as what's and you referred to it, and of course the matrix appearance of things, which is what people live their daily lives around thinking is the reality, is that there is another level or levels beyond that of what's really going on, and how we kind of have been shepherded this way or that by God, the media, the movie industry, the government, you name it. And we're like, going along with the program. And I think maybe there's been people waking up along the way, but I want to say in the last few years is when people are really starting to really pay attention to that probability of how massive it is.
Oh, yeah. In 1944, documents show that the Nazis had a plan called Weltanschauungskrieg. If that's correct
Okay.
pronunciation. Meant worldview warfare. They planned to infiltrate into the United States, control the media, control Hollywood, control our education. And they did. They
Okay.
rewrote the history of World War II by the Rockefeller Foundation, 1946. Um, it, you know, Mockingbird for the media, Hollywood, Project Dove. They did. They created a matrix of perception, and we've been living in kind of like a Truman Show kind of
Yeah.
reality while they
Yeah.
have advanced technology. While we're led to believe that we need to use these primitive, dangerous polluting, obsolete technologies of nuclear, oil, and coal. We're still
Mm,
running gasoline engines. That
right.
we need rocket propulsion in order to overcome gravity.
Right.
All this has been we've been born into this matrix of perception,
Yes.
and for some people it's going to be a huge shock because they have completely bought into it. They watch television, and
Sure.
they spend billions of dollars into think tanks engineering our perceptions and
Yes.
they gain our consent toward the agenda, which is against the people of the planet.
Yeah.
uh and
It's a big giant
But
psyop, and we just don't.
yeah,
Right in the middle of it. It is.
indeed.
It is. Now let me ask you, and I want to ask you something real quick because it seems that you're really knowledgeable, and this is the part that sometimes after World War One, Germany was spanked, supposedly, and their economy was like trashed, is from what I understand. All
Right.
right. How did they go from the aftermath of World War One to where they were when they started to wage war, across Europe, even before the United States became involved in World War Two? Was it because of extraterrestrial help? How did that happen? Where did they go from being losers in the Great War to where they were within a few years?
I'm not the best historian on that, but I know
Right,
they made a huge amount of submarines that almost seemed humanly impossible
right, right.
that they were doing. And Germany, they uh, got their own financial system,
Uh-huh.
and Churchill said, we've got to fight against the strength of the German people, because
Right,
they
right,
have
right.
become
Because
so strong. And then yeah, and they didn't
it
really
almost
need.
seems like a starving Germany. All of a sudden, the next thing you know, they're rolling tanks down the streets of the Arc de Triomphe in France. Like, hey, I know fast forwarding there was other things, but it almost, when you look at it, almost seems like something like, okay, somebody's got to be helping them along, as far as like, yeah, I'm glad you have a lot of smart scientists, but wow, you know,
And they didn't really have to win World War II. If
yeah,
you realize that they had this advanced anti-gravitic technology,
and
is
that,
obviously um, Admiral Byrd, sent down by James Forrestal, who they murdered, in
hmm
1949, because he wanted the public to know about this.
boy,
Completely wiped out all their aircraft down in
okay,
Operation High Jump, going to attack the Nazi base. So apparently they had the technology, but they didn't need to they had infiltrated from within.
Right.
And so what they did was they kept America technologically suppressed. I
Really.
had 10 years experience after uh, we were seeking a congressional hearing to bring forth the
Hmm.
scientists within these black projects that could prove we had, anti-gravity, zero point energy, and so forth,
Right.
which was denied by the Bush administration. Um, Afterward, I volunteered Dr. Greer, who set up this arrangement on the National Press Club back in 2001. He set up a corporation to look at civilian inventors. So for 10 years,
Okay.
one nightmare after another of sorry about
That
that,
is that's good.
the security system.
Okay.
Um, so for 10 years, it just national security. What they did was they set up the Invention Secrecy Act 1951. And so anybody that's got anti-gravity, free energy, or anything that breaks the status quo, they
Right.
automatically get one of these security orders that says your invention's been deemed to be a detriment to the national security of the United States. You cannot share it with anyone. And thousands of these inventions that could help our country and the world uh, have been suppressed that way. And so we've been technologically, retarded while they, with some of the most advanced minds and unlimited finances and off-planet resources and
Hmm.
anti-gravity and alliances with extraterrestrials that are thousands of years in advance, that you can imagine what
Okay.
kind of technologies could be, so many decades ahead of what we're aware of.
Do you what do you think, or do you know what their ultimate aim is? I mean, is it total? I mean, I know this sounds like a thing from a James Bond, total world domination. I mean, it's like, where do you go from there? I mean, so many possibilities exist within, um, you know, or
Well,
are we talking extinction type event? I don't want to.
Well, the if you look into some of these documents, the Vatican is tied in with it, with the
Yes.
government, and you have the
Yes.
secret societies, 33rd degree Freemasons. You look at all, presidents, CIA
Yes.
directors, and media, and all high level, skull and bones, Knights of Malta, and these secret societies and everything work together uh, to a central agenda that the global elite, for lack of a better term,
Right.
they basically want to enslave mankind rather than
Okay.
liberate them and eliminate 90% of the population, and the rest would be a slave force that would support them. That's
Right.
their vision for the future of the world. The last thing they want is, you doing shows like this and
Oh, of
exposing this
course.
kind of
Of course. Of
information.
course. Everybody talks the exposure. Of course, every person that watches it, that it just that their mind, just kind of, especially the ones that their mind is like real puckered and closed, that if it just opens a little bit and they start to question and wonder about certain things.
All I can say
Um,
is, you have to research. You won't find it on the evening news.
no,
The
no,
books have all been sanitized, most of them. There is good information out there, but you have to sort through. There's a lot of
yes,
disinformation out there
no,
to create confusion. There's people who are coming out as witnesses that
yes,
are perfect, intelligence plants that want their counter disclosure assets that basically muddy the waters,
yeah,
and so discreditable, like say the earth is flat and so forth,
yeah. I know that was the
uh,
one that I was like, no, no, yeah, but
yeah.
I understand exactly what you mean. It's like, let's try to put everybody under that tinfoil cuckoo, you know, kind of like identification, or we'll label them. because of
Baseless
stuff like that.
conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
This, yes.
yeah. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, yeah,
let me
put the
make them look
word
as
baseless.
crackpot
There's
as
nothing
possible.
to it whatsoever. Yeah.
Yes. And that's a shame because it's like, hello, no, not everybody. Um, and to me, I look at it as sometimes I feel, and I know this is like maybe a little bit dramatic, but sometimes it almost feels like we're, at the edge of the precipice.
Oh,
And we're,
yeah, we are most definitely. That's a very good definition of where we are right now.
yeah. And it's like, and we're like, and some of us are going, oh my God, and there's others that are, huh, and it's scary because unfortunately, as much as you have a lot of people that are aware or at least questioning, I think that there needs to be more of an extensive amount. When you need to reach critical mass.
Yeah, we need to
Okay,
help the others.
right?
The the normies, I guess what you'd call them,
Yeah,
the
the
people
normies, exactly.
who watch CNN, MSNBC, read the
Yes,
New York Times, and although
yes,
I have nothing but credible information sources, that I
yes,
refer to. I mean, this
right.
stuff sounds like it, and it's very well psychologically laid out to weaponize the counter beliefs so that people that are saying things that are counter, they paint it as, oh, this is far right wing
Yeah,
or
they're
Nazi or
yeah,
label
they're a
it
threat or
whatever.
something like that.
Yeah, right.
No, and it's, yeah, I've heard of the adjectives and the descriptors that they use, and it's like I know that the words are picked precisely for if not what they say, what they infer, to somebody that's listening to it. And yeah, I could see, and there's a lot of people that this is just a personality type also, and I know there's going to be some people that no matter short of, like I tell them, the mothership landing on the lawn of the White House, they're not going to
Exactly.
believe it because they're the type of personality that this is their world. It's, very tight and controlled, and it's very hard for them to, if you move them out of that, they go into a panic attack. Okay, let's take them out of the equation. Hey, not everybody, but there's still, I think, a lot of people out there that with more information, they will at least begin to question and wonder, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. Or that source, that's not, you know what? And it's an uncomfortable situation. It really, really is. And unfortunately, we're tied into our comfort, our lifestyles as Americans, that, we binge on the latest show
Truth
and,
is very uncomfortable when
oh,
it totally will pull you out of your comfort zone.
you
But
want me to tell you what's more uncomfortable than truth? And I'm
but
going to say this as somebody that used to be a hypnotherapist. I'm not practicing anymore.
yeah.
Change. Change is scarier than truth. But what precipitates the change is knowledge of the truth.
and
Okay.
and make no mistake about it that what you don't know can hurt you, like
Of course it
say
can.
following medical advice on the television, for example.
Yes. Yes.
uh any Many different many different things. If you cannot transform the situation if you're ignorant of it.
Of course. Well, and I'm going to give people a perfect example. You remember when they started coming out with ebooks, right? That the Kindle readers and all these formats. And the reason why I say this is I've always had books, like real, like printed books all my life. And I had a really hard time reading on, you know, Kindle or readers or anything of that nature. I know there's different versions, but I didn't think beyond it. And then later on, at some point, I realized, you know what? If they get rid of all the printed books, they can control what gets published or consumed, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or they can go in there into whatever the manuscript was and alter it or change it. And I was like, man, that's scary. And originally, I never thought of it that way. It was just, oh, it's a format that where you can download a manuscript, a book, and read it instantly. And then it's like, man, and it's an uncomfortable thought because it's like, man, I'm really getting suspicious. Am I, you know, am I seeing stuff where there isn't any? But unfortunately, that's where it takes you. Where is like, well, as far as the way we take in information.
Yeah, if everything was completely digital and you had no paper records or
Yes,
whatsoever,
exactly.
bank account or anything,
Nothing.
like just, They could.
Right, right. And like I said, I consider myself quasi normie. I never looked at it initially as beyond like, oh, that's okay. Well, save the planet. You know, you don't use the paper to print the book. So, okay, that's
But
good
keep
for
in
the,
mind, we were all normies. We were all
yeah,
normies until something grabbed our attention that didn't seem quite right, and we followed that rabbit down the hole
yeah,
and found, oh my God, one oh my God after another.
yeah,
And I say to people, look at the history, the
yes.
history that you were not taught in school. Look at the
Mm-hmm.
authenticated documents. Look at all the witness testimonies over the decades. I on the webmatrix.net, it's not a professional site, it's just my online notes. I went from
Right,
1900 to present day,
right.
plugging in all these. That was the only way when that media company wanted me to write an article. That was the only way for me to try to
Yes.
understand
As a
this.
matter of fact, I was looking at that. That is incredible, Dan, what you've done. I saw that how you went ahead and you were like you did that timeline with the I think it was what you started with the 1900s.
Yeah, I started the year 1900 with Tesla,
Let me see if I can get it. Okay.
and went to present day, and every
Uh-huh.
event, every document, every witness. And after a while, I mean, incredible people, that are, admirals and captains and, people in high positions, and otherwise too. It, all this over time, you can't make this stuff up.
Right. And this is the thing that I think sometimes gets too overwhelming. Now let me ask you, you mentioned that in the 1970s you had extraterrestrial contact. Okay.
Yes.
What was this something that happened out of the blue? Was there a triggering event or was there how did that happen? How did that come about and how did it affect you afterwards?
I shared it with Elena Danan, and she said it was an
Mhm.
emethor, which is part of the Council of Five. It's extraterrestrial beings that are benevolent, that
Okay.
give science and things. And it was like a Kundalini opening experience where I
Okay.
could see the being, and I could an incredible love coming out of its eyes and everything. And I
Okay.
projected a sphere in space, and as I observed, one looked like a star tetrahedron, and another one formed into that one, another geometry, and went into infinity, and then turned back into the sphere. And then I knew nothing about platonic solids and sacred geometry at the time, and I started
Okay.
grabbing every book I could. It was like a burning passion to understand. Like, oh my God, that's just like the being said. And then as I researched over the decades scientifically, I find uh, so much matches. In fact, a meeting I had in 2001 with a bunch of scientists, Dr. Greer set up, Nassim Haramein, who's a theoretical physicist. I shared with him the experience he had because he had uh, working on the tetrahedral fractal geometry of the matrix. And I
Right.
shared him the experience. And he says, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. That's the structure of it. So, um, and, I'm researching Elena as well on her information, and like three things, for example, that you can't make up. She
Right.
said before NASA even knew about it, that there's three planets in Proxima Centauri before NASA discovered it, that there's this huge earthquake on Mars before NASA was able to identify it, and then that Neptune next week is going to be something unusual is going to happen. This is Thorhan, her contacts, telling her this.
Okay.
And then lo and behold, Neptune starts heating up like crazy because the Intergalactic Confederation fleet, their DNA is resonating. There are space arcs all throughout our solar system that
Mhm.
are these spaceships that have like archives of knowledge, and they're
Okay.
buried. One's under Lake Vostok in Antarctica.
Okay.
One's up in Ukraine, and one's in the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, they're all over the place. Um,
Is
Dr.
this
Michael
why
Sal's.
supposedly there's something in the Antarctic that they say that they're not sure what's at the Antarctic? And Antarctica, I mean. Is it that, or is that there's a base up there?
No, that's why it's heating up. It's like 70 degrees warmer than normal, and that's
Right.
what's happening on Neptune. Is that it started glowing and is becoming way hotter down where the space arc is on Neptune. And so, these things, you can't make this stuff up. So it's
Okay.
a lot of credibility to the other people who were claiming they have contact and everything. In order to come
Hmm.
up with evidence, they I haven't seen it. So I've been closely following what she's been, and Alex Collier as well has a lot of really valuable, accurate information. And so
After that
uh,
contact, have you been recontacted? Or was that a one-time event for you?
oh, that was a one time. It was 1977. It's been crickets,
Okay.
since then.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, I had a number of experiences. A ship coming down out in the mountains, and I said, "Is somebody
Okay.
out there?" And the ship is coming down. And then I had a on board a craft where they put me through a vortex experience. And anyway, it goes into long detail. I don't have
But
much
let me
time.
ask you, how did you feel when that was going? And then the reason why I ask is that you have people that go from it was terrified to it was great. How did you feel when you had those experiences?
I just want to say my notes on all that is at marcelvogel.org.
Okay.
Um, I um, I I was fascinated. you
Okay.
know,
Okay. See, that's what I'm
I was
asking.
fascinated. It was like I just have a mind that wants to learn more.
Okay. So it wasn't, and because you have like an array of feedback from people that either have been contactees or abductees or whatever, that it goes from fear to or like what you're saying, fascination. And I don't know if it's because who they became in contact with, we're talking different sets, where one makes you feel fearful versus the other
Oh yeah,
type
yeah. If
is
you get abducted by the Nebu Gray, like Elena was when she was like 9 years old, it was a horrific, fearful experience. But she was rescued, by the Galactic Federation of Worlds. Um, Yeah, yeah. Some people have horrible experience, and reptilians
right.
is not the nicest thing to
Right.
to run into either. So, but a lot of people have uplifting spiritual experiences, where it's
Yes.
like they changes their life forever. That once they in the energy field of one of these beings, so it's a mix.
It depends on what do you have any feedback or anything about what they're doing it with the CERN collider? I know they started it up not too long ago, I think during the summer of last year. Um,
I don't have any inside intel on
the
that.
reason why I ask is that I get the feeling that a lot of people are like, when you're trying to do something, but you really don't know what the result might be, as in, because sometimes when the outcome is not certain, but at least none of the outcomes are dangerous to humankind. But I think some people feel like what they're tampering with, and then I'm thinking, is there some type of extraterrestrial handiwork in there, or is this just some mad scientist doing something with physics or trying to prove stuff just to see where it'll
And
go? I don't
their
know.
ceremonies look kind of dark.
Oh boy, yeah, I know. I've looked at that.
you
It's really
know.
it's when you read, oh, they're doing these ceremonies for the openings, but then when you actually watch them, you're like, what in the world is that? What in the world is that? That is like, wait a minute. Okay, there's no other way to interpret it. You can be the most open-minded person, and you're like, okay, that's very dark or very like sinister, or God, that slant is like, yeah,
You have to keep in mind whatever happens on this planet is not we're not isolated. Everything is interconnected through the
right.
whole galaxy
Yes.
and beyond. So
No,
they have people upstairs that are kind of monitoring some of this stuff.
well, and that's another question. It makes you think, okay, how much of them are they going, exactly like what you said, the prime directive, let's go to Star Trek, like hang back and let them work it out. Like how much, obviously, there's some that have not done that. And then you're thinking, are there others that are like, okay, we're just going to hang out and watch and see what happens and let them see how they work it out, how much they have the initiative or the ingenuity or whatever to resolve the problems that they have in their world. Wherever the source might be. But then you think about, well, if you've got extraterrestrial causing problems and us, maybe like you said, with not the technology sufficient to overcome the problems that have been created, it's like kind of an uneven, reality because, you know, mm, it's almost like if one side has a secret weapon while the other side is like, we're like, oh, well, all we've got is our brains and that's about it.
Well, I know there's beings that would like to see the liberation of our
Okay.
planet, and there's beings that want to see the enslavement of our planet.
I know that.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of friends, and
Right.
indications are that, although you wouldn't know by watching the evening news, but
Yes.
this also, all these things that are getting exposed is
Yes.
a good thing,
Sure.
because it's waking up, the so-called normies. I don't mean
Mhm.
that as a derogatory term. It just
No, I'm the contrary.
it's the state of mind before you become aware of what is actually going on and how your perceptions have been manipulated since birth. Uh,
Yes.
and it's really all of our jobs, to help
Yes.
bring out the facts and evidence and help these people in this. Is It's going to be a stretch for a lot of people, what
Yes.
the real reality that's been hidden for so many decades.
Of course. Of course. And um I think that how can I, and I know everybody's different. I'm the kind of person that I'd rather deal with the truth, as unpleasant as it is,
Oh yeah, any day.
versus,
I don't care how
that
bad it
that
is.
ignorance is bliss kind of thing. And then, I hear, like, I don't know if you've heard that now, of course, they've done a lot of, we have the ability of, as far as genome editing and the CRISPR and all this stuff. And then I hear, they're thinking of trying to bring back these so-called species that were driven to extinction, like the dodo bird and the Tasmanian tiger and all of this. And I'm thinking, man, at the beginning, that sounds like really altruistic, but to me, I've seen that door opening, and then it goes down a very dark path with genome, like almost like the Jurassic Park kind of thing that seems so
Oh,
far fetched.
our ancient past is lots of that going on, and with that knowledge of, genetically, creating monsters, so to speak, out of
Yes, yes.
different things. And so
Well,
yeah,
the reason why I asked you that is that, when you were saying that thing about that what they really want is ultimately to have X amount of population. And I'm thinking to myself, I could see where,
yeah, my green screen disappeared.
yeah, it bugged out on you. Where it basically in other words, the ones that are left behind, there's how can I tell you? There's editing of the genome so that you produce certain types of humans. You know,
Yeah, well, in this, the secret space programs and the Nazis with the alliances that they had with the extraterrestrials, they've been doing that, super soldier programs so that they, optimize,
yes.
for soldiers to be, super strong and fast and everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, they've been doing that for a long time behind the scenes.
Do you think that's also, and I've, and this is another thing, I think that sometimes there's so many labs that can be, laboratories that can be set up in other parts of the world or anywhere, with little or no oversight, as in you shouldn't be doing that, whether it's cloning or whatever. Um,
And
that
underground facilities,
yeah, yeah,
back in
wherever.
1940, 46, they brought over in paperclip. Xavier Dorsch was a mastermind for Hitler. They started tunneling in the Monsanto Mountains in New Mexico, and they have like hundreds of deep underground military operations that are several levels deep. And they have
Right.
laboratories there. Like my friend Emery Smith was working at one in Kirkland, Air Force Base where they had many levels down, and he was working with extraterrestrials, and he was doing biological specimens. So they have, they have labs that nobody can see, that's
Right.
under the earth.
Right. And what I've heard is that the people that they use to construct these, in other words, you only work on a certain section. In other words, there's nobody that ever sees everything.
Compartmentalized, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That this is how they kind of keep it. It's not that that person has seen it from beginning to end. Nobody's ever seen the finished product or doesn't know what something else that's going on, and that they use this not only, let's say, for the labor for construction, but even among the scientists or people involved in any of these projects where you just don't know everything or everybody that's involved in it. You might
Or they
maybe know
murder
your
you like
team.
they did with Phil Snyder, who was he was a son of a Nazi U-boat captain who was a medical officer for the USS Eldridge. Um, he came out publicly talking about the Dulce base and everything, and
Hmm.
they strangled him and said he committed suicide.
I've heard that certain suicides. I've heard,
Suicided, they
yeah,
call it.
they've been
Yeah.
suicided. I've also heard that plane crashes are sometimes used also as a cover to get rid of someone, even including even if there's innocent passengers there. If maybe they might just have targeted one person. I guess I've heard of that version too. And like, how can you contradict that? Especially when you have medical personnel that will sign off on a death certificate. Let's say for what you just described, yes, this person was suicidal and they did whatever their form of suicide was. Yeah, somebody that signs off on the death certificate, and that's that.
Like my fellow witness, Mark McCandish, who was one of the witnesses, the 21 witnesses that
Okay.
disappeared behind me. um, he
Okay.
uh, he was going to testify at the Senate hearing, and
Okay.
because he the faster and light craft that we had back in 1950s. Of course, that goes against the narrative that the
Yes.
government's putting out that we don't have this type of technology. And
Right.
he was committed suicide, just before being able to do that. And
Right. The timing is impeccable, right?
yeah, it was. He drew out it was called the Alien Reproduction Vehicle. It was these craft that were built back in the 1950s using mercury and canceling the mass, and these craft that was built back in the 1950s go faster than the speed of light. Uh,
Okay.
and so we supposedly don't have that technology.
Uh,
And Mike Tuber was an Air Force intelligence specialist. He came out and retracted his testimony that he gave 2 years prior, that the Tic Tac that everybody knows about that got on the New York
right.
Times and back
Yes.
in 2017, it was actually U.S. government technology. And he
Hmm.
came out 1 week before Mark was, suicided,
Right.
and said, "Oh, he made the whole thing up. There's nothing to it. I was just a psychological test." As though both of them got met with the people at the door, and one agreed and the other one didn't.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. One got him on with the program, and the other one's like, "No." I was like, "Okay, well, you know what that means." And
Yeah, it's sad because the American public's been deceived for a long time,
of course, of course. I
and
don't know if you're familiar with that movie, and I'm going to use Hollywood because a lot of times things come out in the form of fiction or movies, and they turn out to be more accurate than we thought. It. I want to say the movie came out in the '90s. It's called Chain Reaction, and it's Keanu Reeves. And the premise of
all
the
right.
movie is that they develop free electricity, but with hydrogen power, basically. Free energy, free energy. And of course, the premise of the movie is that the inventor wants to let go of this technology. He's gonna send it out all over the world, and he
Hmm.
gets killed. That's the setup. And when you look at it, it's a really good movie. I like the movie, but then you're thinking, man, this is closer to truth than people
Oh yeah, they
realize.
put so much out in Hollywood that's
Hmm.
mostly a lot of truth mixed in with some fiction. Like
Yeah.
Stan Meyer, who, speaking of hydrogen, was able to get patents and everything to run automobiles on water, with
Yes.
hydrogen, and he was poisoned. You
I
know,
heard about that, and it was like,
and that's not only in the energy industry; it's also in the medical industry. You have
oh,
many. many people have come out with cures and things,
Yes.
like Royal Raymond Rife, uh, and others. And actually, my mother was cured of cancer by Dr. Max Gerson. His daughter shared the story that he was strychnine poisoned, and then he finally got his book out, A Cure for Cancer. And then he got a
Okay.
heavier dose of strychnine poisoning. This time it killed him. And
How were
American
they giving
Cancer
it to him?
Society published his death that he died of, you guessed it, cancer.
I know it's ironic, isn't it? Let me. What? Uh, yeah, and I want to interject this because I've never realized till lately how many psychopaths are in the medical field. Okay, I
Oh,
really. It's been
oh,
heartbreaking
the
for me.
whole
It's been
system
like,
needs to be
ah,
taken down. All the
yes.
hospitals need to be retrofitted
I
with
was like,
new
oh,
modalities of healing. In other words, the
yes,
energetic healing,
yes,
the holographic medical technologies that can restore, add hundreds of years onto your life,
yes. I mean,
um,
the,
and
the, it,
cure
it,
any
it it was like
disease.
I've been, and it's like, man, this is incredible. I can understand, but this is what is this? How did these people recruit so many psychopaths for the medical field? What happened to the Hippocratic Oath, for the love of Mike? To me, it's like I look at this and I'm like flabbergasted because you always hear some doctors have good bedside manners, bad bedside, and there's some that are jerks. And like you said, you're always going to get your little mix of, I'm God kind of personality as doctors. But it's become evidence, like, how did we get all of these types of personalities?
Hmm. Well,
Okay.
my great grandfather was the president of the Homeopathic Medical Society back
Ah,
in the
okay.
early 1900s, going up against Rockefeller, who
Okay.
had, basically, with his money and everything, got the
Mhm.
allopathic, which is the pharmaceutical industry, is the
Yes.
allopathic medicine basically doesn't really cure anything. It usually has toxic side effects to it, and so the whole natural energetic approach to healing and things doesn't make a
Yes.
lot of money.
Right,
Carrot
exactly.
juice doesn't make a lot of money,
Of course
that
not.
cured my
Of course
mother.
not.
So yeah,
People
we
don't
have
realize
this. Yeah, the AMA is all on
thank you, the
board.
AMA. The AMA has a
Yeah.
stranglehold on everybody.
Oh my God. If you look back at the history of the medical system on the
Mhm.
webmatrix.net, I go into a history on a link called Nazi eugenics and Big Pharma. And it goes back
Yes.
into the history of the medical industry and how it got corrupted. And you have to think about the CDC back in 1946, where they brought in what was it, 16 or 1700 Nazi doctors that were doing horrific things that brought them into the CDC.
Right.
You look at all these things that people don't know about in history,
Right.
that brings us to today's world and may explain some of the reasons why things are the way they are.
Right, because you always think of Dr. Mengele as that one out, that one crazy, horrific, psychopathic German doctor that was doing these horrible experiments. And you
Right.
never find out about what you're talking about. Yeah, there's more versions of him with different names that just history is kind of blipped over. And if you said their name now, you'd be like, and who's that supposed to be? And they were doing the same type of experimentation
Exactly.
with humans, which
Exactly.
is
Yeah, there's some of the stuff that Alan Dulles was doing with MK Ultra and all the stuff, the experiments they were doing on people, and even with the U.S. Army on
hmm
certain populations in the U.S. People, there'd be a huge uprising, and there needs to be
well,
a peaceful
the
uprising
of course. Well, you know
of
what?
the
And this
people
is the
against
thing.
this.
All these different, it's not only the AMA, it's the oh my God, the one for the attorneys. Well, every state has its own, board that oversees the attorneys. All of them. It's just the same
Yeah,
version
you lose your
of.
license unless you follow the agenda, like
Yeah, exactly. It's not whatever
certain
your license might be. It might be
protocols.
medical, it might be legal, it might be whatever. Pretty soon, if you're a beautician and you got a license and you come to, yeah, you're going to lose your beautician's license. I mean, that's the way it's going. Where you better be on board with the program,
You
or
You
That's that.
inject them with the remdesivir or you lose your license, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And I was watching this and I was like, that, hey, I got my little dog. Hey, Slim, cut it out. My audience knows that I have a lot of dogs, so they're always making weird noises. But when I was seeing this, I was like, I don't get this. And before that, how's this? You know how there was always a big joke about all these pharmaceutical commercials that when they do that disclaimer, it's like, who's one's going to want to take this?
Brought to
It's
you by
just,
Pfizer. Yeah, right.
it's like anything that can happen to you as a concept, the side effect is like, why would I risk taking this drug? Are you crazy? But it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like
There's
almost
this
like a fun.
one that says, yeah, you can vomit and heart attack and other, and it ends. It says it very quietly in the background. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, at
A
the end.
wise choice. It ends with, you know.
Yeah, right. And it's like, and after a while, you laugh at it. It's like a running joke, like all these disclaimers that they put in these commercials. It's like, oh, it's going to do this for you, but by the way, it's got this and this and this and this, and like, I think I'll just deal with whatever the illness is. Thanks, but but even then, I think though everybody in the last couple of years after I want to say after 2019, everybody was like, what is going on with
Oh
this?
yeah, I love what this one doctor says. If you want to live a long, healthy life, stay away from doctors and
Yes,
hospitals, and
yes,
seek.
yes,
If you're lucky to have a good naturopathic doctor, learn nutrition and so forth, and that's so
yes,
true. You want to stay. The medical system has been corrupted,
yes,
and from its onset, and so it needs to be dismantled
yes,
and replaced with energetic modalities that our off-planet friends are assisting,
right. Well, something,
and they've had this technology. They haven't been able to bring it out to the public, until first the what's called the deep state, I guess you'd call it,
right.
needs to be taken down, and these
Yes.
criminals, Nuremberg 2.0,
Mhm.
crimes against humanity, they need to be taken out of operation. Then these things can be brought out that have been
Right. Well, the
running
thing
behind
is
the
like
scenes.
how many let me ask you, have you ever had tried a med bed yourself personally?
No, Elena has. She
Okay.
had a horrific situation, and it cured her. My
Okay.
other friend, Jean Charles, he was in the Solar Warden program, rescuing some people from these reptilian operations, and he
Okay.
was attacked by a black Draco, which cut his body almost in half. I mean, they had
Okay.
to bring him into one of these med beds that had crystals and different technologies, and it completely restored him back again. And
Okay.
my other friend Tony Rodriguez, he was an insectoid battle on Mars that they chopped his arm and his foot off, and apparently what they do is they make clones, and so
Okay.
these clones are like avatars that they
Mhm.
can transfer your soul consciousness into another body.
Right.
So
Okay.
and that happens for some of these soldiers where they get, you know, they invest a lot into these soldiers, and like Randy Kramer, for example, he's been replaced many times apparently,
Right.
um, and so
So in other
yeah,
words,
this
it's not a question of repairing that actual body. It's transferring the consciousness to a different body.
yeah, Chris O'Connor, wonderful uh, person who sent me a Deems device, a healing device. He
Okay.
was involved in transferring consciousness into one body into another, and also they can age regress and they can age progress your body. So the
Okay.
technology that they have is just uh, beyond most science fiction.
Let me ask you, do you think, because I kind of see also a drive where creating humans is taken out of the natural, as in the womb of a woman. I see this aim of like basically growing a human in a pod kind of deal.
Well, yeah, the Gray's been doing that. You know, when the Nebu for their uh, hybrid program, where
Mm-hmm.
they would, you know, take it out of the woman, you know, after they
Right.
abduct her, and then they would grow it in a lot of that was going on in the Delsey base, and these beings are, um, you know, they're hybrids.
Right. So basically, well, I guess that means then they're genetically compatible with us, in other words, because otherwise,
Yeah, I'm not the best to talk on that subject, but they it's kind of like they wanted to infiltrate into our planet and take it over, but they couldn't do
hmm,
it directly, and
right.
so they actually had to modify the prime directive in order to address this
Okay.
indirect method of infiltration into our planet.
Okay. Okay. Because you go, I've heard that version. I've heard the version that their interest with us in our genetic material is because theirs is so poor or non-existent that they're facing extinction. So that's what their attraction
Oh
is
yeah,
to
that was
humans.
their front story that they put up, but
Okay.
their it was a nefarious. They didn't have humanity's best interest in mind.
Okay. Okay. In other words, well, whichever way you look at it, though, we're being used. Whether whatever their ultimate aim is. So, do you think that? Because I know that everybody thinks of that, collectively. Once people become aware, the power of our collective consciousness
Oh yeah,
can
yeah.
produce certain results or make certain things manifest.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and that's what I've been doing with Jenhan Redion, Thorhan's younger brother, who has advanced knowledge. If you go to marcelvogel.org, I have all the
okay.
notes, like over 60 some pages of exchanges with him. And what Elena and I did was took the crystals that were specially cut, and we had hundreds of people online, and we did
Okay.
a positive vision for the positive timeline on Earth. You know, seeing the Earth, seeing the criminals taken care of, and
Mm-hmm.
technologies released, and a beautiful world, of form, and everybody pulsed their breath. Marcel discovered this, that you get this more of an impact of your conscious thought into the crystal, by
Okay.
like you sneeze like that.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody did that with a crystal, and we spiked the Schumann resonance when we did that, because it's known that the square root of 1% of the population, there's 8 billion people on the planet, and
Right.
that's less than 9,000 people,
Right.
have a beginning kindling effect on the collective consciousness of the entire planet. And so when you're
Wow.
using a crystal, it's like a amplification of that.
Okay. That is wow. That's incredible. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, what point do we reach that, that everything starts to shift,
Oh, we have they've been trying to hide this power. Back in 1957, Professor Heinz Eisnick of the University of London, there was hundreds of universities and scientists were taking out of the books and things the
Mhm.
powers of human consciousness to affect
Right.
reality. And so, yeah, we have this incredible power because we're a fractal of source,
Mhm.
otherwise known as God.
Yes, yes, exactly.
That each one of us affects the collective mind, because any part of a hologram, if you change it, it affects all
Yes.
parts of the hologram. So we're all interrelated in that way. So, and when you uh, Jenhan was able to show me a way, using a function generator with special silver electrodes and a specific frequency, that opened up a phase conjunction node, which opened up a vortex within the crystal that allows the consciousness to imprint into the holographic planetary matrix. And this is what the device looks like.
Okay.
like
Okay.
this. And it's hooked onto a generator. And
Okay.
Marcel didn't know this. This is something he would
Okay.
have loved to known, but the two vortices that happen within the crystal, they meet, and if you stimulate the piezoelectric, it opens up a wormhole of to link into the singularity. And when you link into
Okay.
the singularity, you have more of an effect into the entire matrix.
So you remember when 2007 when The Secret came out? That movie where it was
Oh,
like
right,
based,
right, right. Yeah,
and
of course.
I know, I mean, I know that that was painting the idea in broad strokes, and it was like, oh, that's so corny. You're gonna sit there, and you're gonna wish for a new car, and poop. And it's like, no, but the idea behind it is pretty much spot on as far as the power of what
Oh,
our
yeah, yeah.
minds and manifestation.
Uh,
Um,
as Jenhan said, that dissonance cannot attune to an ordered state of geometrical resonance. In other words,
mhm.
Dr. Emoto, I was shown in the movie, that you just mentioned.
The Secret.
The secret is the secret, the secret. Um, that thoughts of love,
Yes.
gratitude, appreciation form these beautiful crystal
Right
because
on the water
water
when they experimented with water.
water like quartz are based on the same fractal
Yes.
holographic formula as love is, as which is more complex formula, but they're all interrelate and are interdimensional bridges. And water, which is hexagonal, is like quartz.
Yes.
uh, when you put in hatred and
Yes.
jealousy and so forth, it makes these distorted patterns and it won't crystallize into the hexagonal matrix. Just like Jen Han was saying, the dissonance, which is hatred
Right.
or fear, versus
Mhm.
love and gratitude, resonates. And that's why when you're working with crystals and things like that, when you work with love, love also gets into the higher gamma frequencies of the brainwave. You're able to transcend into the higher it's able to convey the information without dissonance when it's a
Exactly.
loving thought, like the good of all
Yes.
humanity, for example.
Exactly. And this is what that's the X factor that I think they want us to overlook. They want to make us very materialistic, and if it's not immediately quantifiable, as in you can reproduce it in a laboratory model, oh, it's like, oh, that's so kooky, whatever. And it's like, no, yeah, it does. There is that power that we humans have, either solitary or God. Can you imagine when it's multiplied by a certain amount of humans? And
Oh,
like I said,
yeah.
if we did not have that ability, they wouldn't bother trying to restrict our thoughts. But they'd be like, who cares? It's from the moment that they try to restrict how we think, what we think, it's because we do have that power, that innate ability with our minds and the direction of things and what gets manifested here, either either because it already exists, but you want to bring it into a certain location, or it actually manifests here where we're at on this plane or in this dimension or however. But
Think of the
yes.
power of Hollywood, of movies,
Woo, boy.
of millions of people watching things that are um, fearful or
Yes.
doing
Yes.
human hurting other humans or killing other humans and torturing and
Oh,
all the
yes.
different imagery that is put out and projected to millions of television sets or
Yes.
movie theaters or whatever. Uh, it uh, it affects the collective mind because collectively we create reality.
Yes. Yes. And fear is very powerful. Fear is very
Yeah,
powerful. It's a very
but it's
powerful
not as
emotion.
powerful as love.
Yeah, but
Love.
you know what? When you bang people over the head with fear, fear, fear all the time, people, it's like that. In other words, it's a weapon. It's a very useful weapon against us, is what I'm saying, because we kind of like, at least if you have a good instinct to survive physically and or mentally, you get startled. And like you said, if you control all these outlets of information or perception, whether it's the movie or the media, us as humans, we're looking at this and we're going, what? Things like that. And then instead of having this occasional situation of fear, which is what I think of the problem is, we start living in a constant state of fear. Just
That's how
different.
people are controllable. If
Yes.
everybody's in a state of fear, they're controllable.
Yeah. Yes. We and what it does is, um how can I say it? It puts us in a state of anxiety, that systemic existence inside of fear, just at different levels. Just tune it up or down, but it's always like, okay, now what? Yeah, I think, and at the same time, of course, it distracts us away from perceiving the really important stuff, because we're all caught up with all these. When it comes right down to unimportant, but it's magnified to look like, wow.
Yeah, look at the fear that was put out. Things we can't talk about, of course, that was put out, on the television about, giving medical advice
Oh
because of this
yes.
horrific thing that's going on, and then everybody
No,
should
it
be
was.
scared and wearing their napkins,
Well,
and
you know
everything.
what? It's like, I bet, because I think I did it. I think everybody at the very beginning, we thought of all the movies, dystopian future movies, that we thought, oh my God,
Oh,
you know, everybody, that kind of basically movie ran through people's heads. Like, is that what this is going to be?
oh, and all the predictive programming,
Yeah.
the movies that they put out.
Oh
That's
yes.
yeah,
Yes. It was
right.
quite, and at the beginning, I think, like you said, I don't fault us as humans. We were like, okay, well, this sounds really serious. Boy, okay. And then you're thinking, man, I saw something like this in the movie where
Yeah.
so it was all downhill from here. And then, of course, it turned out to be something totally different, quite different. And this, I think, that what I call the industry of fear. There's
Yeah,
not only is
but
it manipulative, there's a lot of money to be made. And I want to say that sometimes that's a driving
oh yeah,
force.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're with the agenda, you'll get rich. If you're not, you'll
Yes.
get fired, and that's the way
Yes.
the system has been operating for some time.
Yes,
But
more than what people realize.
truth has the ability to resonate,
Yes. Yes, it
and
does.
my personal observation of what's going on right now is very, very positive,
Yes.
and I believe things are going to be more is going to get revealed, and the
Yes.
world will transform into a beautiful future. Elena
Yes.
was able to go on board a craft Metaton ship, and was able a time looking device and look only 20 years in our future,
Hmm.
and the Earth was beautiful. It was a things were things were very
Yes.
good.
Well, no, I
So
think
just
that
20
there's
years in the
there's
future.
there's a mindset and where they say humans are bad for the earth. In other words, that the earth is, as in the earth and the plants and the animals, are better off without humans. And I'm like, I beg to differ. We're earthlings. Okay, we're meant to be here. We're
Yeah,
part of the earth. Okay. Contrary to what they make us believe. Yeah, I know we've done sometimes maybe horrible things with the environment, maybe because we didn't know better,
but it's
because of
not us
greed.
that's been doing it. Think
Right.
about
But
it.
we're
Yeah.
like, but that's the way they're telling us,
Oh, they
bad
turn
human.
everything around and blame it on us,
Right.
when
And we're like, oh,
we've
I
been
didn't mean to do that.
manipulated.
And it's like, and you know what the answer to this is? The earth is better off without humans. And it's like, no, you
Yeah,
know.
they've
And
been
I'm sure you've
gaslighting
seen
us
there's
for a
a.
long time.
Yeah, so hopefully. Anyway, Dan, thank you so much. It has been wonderful to speak to you. For my podcast listeners, what is the website where they
Oh,
could see your
my
material at?
not professional site. It's just my online notes because that media
Mm-hmm.
company wanted me to write article was thewebmatrix.net. That has to do with the disclosure and extraterrestrial and everything. And as far as the crystal research that I did back in the 80s with Dr. Marcel Vogel, and also with my friend Elena Danan, who's provided the link because she has this quantum communication device implant that is able to share this information with Jen Hanaredian. That's at marcelvogel.org. I did a site in his honor to
Okay.
perpetuate his work. So between those two sites, you have to dig, but you can
Okay.
um, find different pieces of information. And it's like things are changing and happening so fast. I have so much updating to do. I was just looking at my
Right.
secret space program page, and there's so many witnesses that have come out since I
Yes.
started the page that I haven't done good service to by adding them yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't. It's things are happening so rapidly. I've just kind of like the only
I
things
know.
I'm updating lately is just the crystal technology, as we're going ongoing communications with Jenhan, as he is giving us more insights on how to use this crystal technology from their knowledge, which is thousands
Okay.
of years in advance from us.
Right. And I've seen it. You have a wealth of material on there on your website. I was looking at that, like you said, that timeline that you have. That's great. The information on there is fantastic.
Yeah, and it
Again,
has references, and
yeah, yeah, no, but
everybody
it
do
gives
your
somebody
own due
a
diligence.
chronological order as to how we've gotten to where we're at right now. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. It doesn't, nothing makes any sense. All of a sudden, everything makes perfect sense when you understand the history that has brought
Yes.
us to today.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Again, Dan, thank you so much. It has been
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful. And I hope you're
My
going to come back and we can keep on talking about this subject, which I find is fascinating.
my pleasure. Good to have a in-depth discussion with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's hope for the best because I know we have a good future. I believe in us humans. I'm a humanist, not a transhumanist, a humanist. I believe in the goodness of human beings.
Me
So
too.
take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Wow. Let me tell you. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna put my 2 cents worth in for the chicken thing. That people say, well, I think my secret weapon also is that I have a radio out there. I have like a little covered barbecue area where my chickens they piddle around under it, and I have some feed in their water, but close by. And the radio station, an FM radio station I have, is like one of these oldies, 70s, 80s, 90s pop music, and I turn it on in the morning, and in the evening I turn it off, and I think that has something to do with my egg production because going to what Dan was talking about where the Japanese doctor did the experiment with the water as far as the intent or where you want to put it, with love or goodness or good thoughts and things like that. Same thing, music doesn't, yeah, I mean, I know everybody says, well, music like Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and all that, that's great. But even for chickens, I think my chickens put a lot more eggs because they're enjoying this bubblegum music from 70s, 80s, and 90s. Because it's one of the few stations that I can get a really good reception on way out here where I'm at. And on radio, it's one of those little, I dug it up. It's one of those little radio CD little things, and I got it hung up on a peg. And it's one of the few stations that I can get with a clear reception, and that's what it is. And all my chickens see me in the morning, turn it on, and they cluck and they come around there, like I said. And I think that has had some type of contribution to it. And a lot of the things that we were talking about, uh, to some people might think, "Way, that's way out there," or or tinfoil or cuckoo or whatever. God, there's a lot of different adjectives. And I think once upon a time, I myself would have been one of those that said, "Hey, that's weird. Those people are weird. Or where did they come up with this stuff?" I've always been a very open-minded kind of person, but even then, even if I would have kept an open mind, I'd be like, "Yeah, that stuff that's really." And you know what? But at the same time, I always said, you cannot be inflexible when it comes to new ideas or new disclosures. At the very least, you have to take a look at them and examine them and say, okay, this sounds kooky, but is it really? Or whatever. And going based on that, as time has gone by, especially in the last few years, but you know, again, I'm going to bring up when you've had the benefit of having lived the last at least more than 40 years, because there's been so much technological advances. that you see, okay, before, during, and after certain things, that you have a comparison to it. And you could say, you know what, this is not right, or this doesn't make sense, or why is this being handled this way, or why are you being treated this way? And then what, like I was telling him, and he's absolutely right. Once upon a time, there was three main channels that everybody watched, and there was these sacrosanct, uh, how can I say, the reporters like Walter Cronkite and who was this Brinkley and all these people that they were like whatever they said, well, there's got to be the truth, like no questions asked, and that was it. And it's not like now. It's not like now where you have all these different sources. Okay, besides the mainstream, but there's a gazillion million now reporters out there, and uh, maybe they're in the scheme of things. You might think, oh, they're minor players, but that grip that these three major networks had as far as the arbiters of information have been totally diluted, totally. And I think that that's what's enabled this crack to open up, where people, some people, no, never, and but more people, even like he said, the normies, us normies, have started to hear or witness, or and it's like, man, yeah, they sound kooky, but not really. Wait a minute, that makes sense. Wait, hold on. Or things that we've witnessed, and it's like, what's going on here? And as uncomfortable as it makes us feel, or that it's going to wobble our existence or the way we live our lives, especially if we're happy with our lives, for better or worse or whatever, that it's like, man, I cannot ignore this. I cannot stick my head in the sand and make believe that this is just a kooky theory somebody's come up with. I can't do that because just too much evidence or something at the very least that I have to question. I need to get more information on this because there's something here that does not add up. And I think more and more people are coming around to that because, yes, I do believe there's a lot of psychopaths in very important positions, but I think the bulk of humanity, okay, are not psychopathic or sociopathic, have a very decent instinct for survival for themselves and for their children, their families. And they're like not on board with this. All right. They are not on board with this. They are like, wait a minute. And the ultimate goal that you see described, that once upon a time would have been the storyline on a dystopian science fiction film or book, to some people is like, man, that's once upon a time. I would have seen this 30 years ago. I would have said, man, what a great movie. That was really interesting. And now we see it and it's like, that's not that far fetched. That's within the realm of possibility. I wouldn't want that future. I don't want to live in that future. I don't want to leave that future for my family, for my city, my country, the world. No. And I think a lot of people for once are putting, digging their heels in and going, no, slow it down. Hold on, hold on. And what happens is that when you get a group of people saying, no, wait, hold it, either physically or literally, figuratively in their heads, in the way they think or accept things, then you get that force behind it that's been pushing all along. Now step it up, because it's like, no, you can't. You're not going to dig your heels in. You're not going to stop, because we need you to go in this direction where we've been trying to take you maybe for decades. So, and I think that that's what's happened, that people are digging in their heels or stopping at the very least. And that force that has been pushing us along, that we kind of thought, nah, there's nothing, because we're, if you're being pushed along and you're going in the right direction, you really don't need to be pushed. You're being guided. You might not even feel it. It's when you stop, then you realize you've been being guided and pushed and shoved. And I think that's where we're at sometimes, where people are like, what's with a shoving? Wait. And a lot of persons, from the moment that they realize that they're getting shoved, is like, okay, you know what? Now I don't know really what's going on, but just because you're shoving me, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to move forward, because why are you doing that? And I think that that's happening to a lot of people, where it's that you can't force me to think or feel that way and just expect me to accept it because you say so, as in you, as the collective, whatever the you is, um, just because of that, right? Um, and it makes most people get suspicious. All right. Most people get suspicious when things like that happen, sometimes suspicions are founded and sometimes they're not. But at the very least, uh, um, when something, when you feel like you're being driven into a certain type of behavior, and maybe before at some point you were being, kind of like romanced into that behavior. And when I mean romanced, I don't mean like in the romantic love, romanced as in everything is beautiful and sweet, and we're going to make you feel like this is wonderful and come this way, and this and that, and everybody's like, oh yeah, this is great, I love it. And then all of a sudden you realize, boy, I was being taken for a ride. Yeah, you know. And I'm going to give you, for instance, this right here called the phone. The phone. You see, I remember an existence when this didn't exist. I mean, yeah, you had one in the wall, a landline, that was it. And and when this came out, unless you were like a very important person or a doctor that you could afford to have one of those whatever things installed. But let's say life did not exist. I remember when there was no such thing as beepers. There was this instant access to people was not there. Right. And when all these technological advances came along, of course, everything was presented as the advantages of it, the advantages, the benefits. You can be found, you can call for help. Of course, that's the biggest one. Call for help. Yeah, of course, you can look everything on here because basically this thing is like a mini computer. But mostly, what sold it was, you can call, uh, or somebody can call you that needs help, or vice versa, or anything, right? And then little by little, landlines went the way of the dodo. And well, first to start with the beepers. How's this? Let's go back a little bit. First, it was the answering machines in the house. If you watch these '80s movies, you'll see them. Then you came the pagers, and before it was just doctors had pagers, and then before you knew it, you had pagers, which of course, and this is when payphones still were around. All right. And then payphones were making a lot of money because, man, when that page came in, you would call. But basically, it was drawing this lasso around getting a hold of you. And then, of course, the phones came out, and little by little, it became more affordable and more mainstream. And uh, the general public, in other words, could have one. And of course, you were sold as in, you need to have this. And then came you really should get your teenager one of these because in an emergency, they can call you, they can, whatever, whatever. They have one of these, you can save them. Or if they need to call mom or dad. So it was like, once upon a time, kids and teenagers were even restricted from landline use. Like, hey, you can't get phone calls in here after 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Those were house rules like that. And by the early into the 2000s, it was like, hey, your kid and that age that they should get one of these started becoming shorter and shorter. First, it was your teenager, so that they could get a hold of you in case of an emergency or vice versa, something happens. And then in some cases, people were saying, well, you know what, you could use it also, the GPS ability, you have a younger child and you could restrict with parental controls and this and that. And my point is that from the beginning, it's always been sold as in the benefits of the benefits, the benefits, the benefits, the benefits. And let's not look at the disadvantages to it. Nobody wants to talk about that, which is you're accessible 24/7. You can be tracked. And for people like us, the normies who live very boring vanilla lives, it's like, but it is. It's not right. It's like, why would you want to know where I'm going, what I'm doing, what my shopping, where I go shopping, where I went out to shopping? It's like, wait a minute, that kind of thing. And we don't like to think about it, but at the same time, it kind of there's in other words, nobody you know how they say that nobody does this the solid, as in accessibility of this nature, unless there's a big benefit for them on the other end. We're always thinking that it was our benefit, that we were the ones that were winning in that equation, and it's not. They just made it seem that way, and it's not. Because if we would have been told at the inception of this type of technology, oh, guess what? Eventually, we're going to tie to this is going to tie you into that. We know where you're at, what you're doing, what you're looking up. We might even tie in the your banking or your money, or we know where you spend your money on, what you buy, what you do, where you go, who you talk with, what you say, and blah, 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 and there's not going to be nothing really that we don't know about you. People would have said, "What? Hell no, man! I don't need that. Forget it." I'm telling you, I guarantee you this. Or or it would never have gotten beyond a flip phone, like, hey, let me, the original little phones where all you could do was basically call somebody and say, hey, yeah, you okay? Yeah, oh yeah, I got a flat, come and get me. That was it. That would have been, and would have gone any further than that if people would have realized what came with this. And let me tell you something, this I understand. I've been alive for the before, the during, and the after. Well, the after is like what it is. God knows where this is going. It's scary. It's scary because you have to be blind not to see. And then we always want to think that the people that are in charge of this technology would never betray humankind. And I think we're finding that that's not always the case. As a matter of fact, that's never the case. And it's a very daunting thing. I think that most normal human beings with a conscience and a moral compass find that idea hard to fathom, to understand. That kind of that level of manipulation. We just can't, like, sometimes we have a hard time digesting it because that's like it's almost foreign to us. How's that? And it's one of those things where it our innocence has to be stripped away if we want to survive. And it's a hard thing because hopefully, you never want to go there, but yeah, I mean, this is one of those things. And along with all the other technological advances, not some of them are very good and important, but there's a lot of them that have been, how can I say, gift wrapped in such a way that it's presented as in for our benefit or children's benefit or the future generations or for your comfort, for blah, 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 blah. And we're like, yeah, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And that's why we're going to either give it to you free or for hardly anything, something you can afford, or just something about just everybody can afford. Believe me, I remember once upon a time we had to get a credit check to get a phone. Okay. You have to get, like, in other words, you couldn't just go into a phone store and get a phone. They would do, run your credit in order to see if they could open an account for you. That one, that went down quick. Nowadays, you can even go to any of the Walmart or whatever and buy one of those pay as you go phones, one of the what they call those burner phones. Once upon a time, you had to run a credit check to get a phone. And I guess they realized, man, we can't do that. That's leaving out a swath of humanity, that their credit isn't going to pass muster, and they're not going to get a phone. No, 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 no. We got to get this into everybody's hands. Yeah, yeah. There you go. There you go for your dose of conspiracy theories. Conspiracy doesn't mean they're not true. So anyway, guys, I hope you like this show with Dan. I I've gone on his site. He has this great setup chronologically of events that bring us to where we're at now. Really interesting information. Um, and I urge you to go on. I'm going to have the link to the credits of the show, but go and visit it. Also, don't forget to sign up for my Substack newsletter. Like I said, I have all the information there. uh, New recordings, old recordings, articles, book releases, you name it. And again, if you want to listen to any of the podcast versions of any of the shows, whether it's Stories of the Supernatural, Nightshade Diary, Supernatural Story Time, I have all the shows, all the MP3 files dating from the first one that you can listen to on your browser or download the MP3 file. The advantage to that of going to MiamiGhostChronicles.com or NightshadeDiary.com or supernaturalstorytime.com is that I don't have commercial interruptions. You can listen to all of this without the advertising coming on. So if you want to, go on there in that way. Or if not, like I said, I have links. You can find me on, iTunes, iHeartRadios, Spreaker, Spotify, all the major podcast platforms. You're going to find me on there as well. So again, until next time, I have a lot of great guests coming on. This year, I am going to do my Mardi Gras live stream. And I will be seeing you guys soon. Till then, take care.